Okay, thank you, Raghu, Pranam, for coming and joining in this conversation. It's a privilege always to speak to you and to have some of your ideas. And this is a part of a series of conversations around exploring the idea of the center, the idea of what is it to discover one's own center and maybe even to birth a centrist movement in this country. What would be the core of it, core ideas behind it, and so trying to reach out to people whose thought can power this, whose thought can inspire this, and in that context, reaching out to you. And I just want to directly start with the conversation around the center because when we had spoken, you had a very different take on it. So maybe Raghu, what is the center and what is your warning about using center?
Okay. Let's look at these ways of categorizing things first to start with. Right. Now, one of the problems in these kind of categorization, left, right, and things like that, is these are very linear, binary ways of categorizing. And I think it's an extreme oversimplification of the complexity of human existence. Yeah, that is one. Secondly, if you look at the history of left and right and things like that, it doesn't have a very glorious history. It started off in France, if my understanding is right.
Yeah.
And it referred to the gentleman on the left and gentleman on the right. And the gentlemen on the right were all people who were well-dressed and maybe had a bath or they didn't have a bath, but they had perfumes. And the other half, didn't have this, and they were, a little more from poorest sections and so on. So this is an overgeneralization, first of all, and secondly, a meaningless way of looking at it, right? And looking at debate as A versus B, and all of these things are all very simplified ways of looking at the world. Right. So in that, if you say center, it means nothing. Right. And if you go to Aristotle and things like that, they say the middle has no meaning at all. Right. So there's this famous excluded middle and so on in the discourse, right? So these categories fundamentally don't make sense. Right. So how do we look at this whole thing then? Yeah. So there are a number of ways of looking at it. Okay. Now, one way of looking at it is to look at what are the key, frames and paradigms of thought that are around today. Right. So there's one paradigm of thought, which is scienticism, which is bad science. Now, what is bad science? Bad science is the way the tobacco lobby or the pharma lobby or the plastic lobby, or the pesticide lobby uses science to spread ignorance and to attack good science. Right? There was even a film about tobacco talking about how when the first clear evidence came, which was linking tobacco smoking to cancer, how the tobacco lobby got together and said, how do we use science and propaganda to make sure that this new discovery linking cigarette smoking with death can be dealt with? So what did they do? They used the methods of science. Okay. And they funded research into all kinds of possible connections. Let's say if one paper said tobacco is, linked with lung cancer or tobacco is linked with something, they funded research on every other thing. Okay. ostensibly to create more science, which is what they propagated. They went to the press and said, we are such nice people. We want to find the truth. Science is going to find the truth for us. And they funded research so that the whole question is obfuscated. And you say it's inconclusive. And this method has been used over and over and over again. Okay, it's been used, pesticides versus bees. Then there's this whole study of plastics, okay, where trace elements of certain kinds of chemicals cause huge problems in people, right? So all of these things, people have used the same method. Okay. So what is happening? You have good science, and then there are ways in which the method of science is used to defeat the purpose of science, which is to discover the truth. Okay, this is a very strong thing if you look at. Okay, so what, like let's take another example to make this more clear. Yeah, you have an environmental problem. Okay, where I'm living, for example, yeah, in Nilgiris. So what happens? A study is started where there is a very clear evidence. Gadgil and people like that studied this place and talked about ecodiversity, the importance of this area in terms of water, in terms of seed varieties. A whole lot of things were studied. What happens now? This study has to go to the politician, because you cannot save an environment just by studying and saying this is the science. Some laws have to be passed. Okay, so some other political processes and policy making has to come in if you actually have to preserve an area. The moment you go there, you've got into political power, you've got into money power, and a whole lot of things. So immediately what happens, some other studies are triggered and things like that happen. And then there is the whole lobby of people who want to cut down trees and put tea or this or that, or plantations, all kinds of other things come in, right? Which obfuscate the reality of the truth. And they use the same method. They use graphs, they'll use this, they'll use that. So this is one very strong thing happening in the world today.
Yes.
Right? And then what does it do? You take yoga. Right? Now, yoga has to do with consciousness. It has to do with deep processes in the mind and so on. Right? You go and see what kind of research is being done in yoga. It is only superficial stuff that says, do this, oxytocin level goes up, do this, something else goes up, and trying to use people's idea that science somehow tells the truth to do research which is fundamentally not scientific. Right? Human beings are not statistical things, and there's such a complexity in the human being. I'm not saying that asana practice does not lead to positive health results. But in looking only at this band, what have you done? You've reduced human beings into objects. You've reduced the entire range of inner reality, consciousness. All of this is not measurable, right? And you slowly get into a discourse which converts something which is a very deep inner transformational process into a consumerist thing.
Yes.
Using science as a logic to sell. So this is one huge chunk of the mind, the way the mind is being used today.
Yes.
Leftists do this, rightists do this. Everybody uses this method for their own purposes. So what is left and right in this?
The underlying thought process is the same.
Yeah, whether it's a communist regime in China or a capitalist regime in the US or any mixture of it, they're all using bad science to obfuscate truth. This is a very serious matter, right? Look at another thing that's happening. For some reason, there is a hold of monotheistic thinking, right? What is monotheistic thinking? It says there is one God, there's one truth, one set of standards, and everybody conform to those set of standards, and you'll be safe. Now, this is used by political structures, it's used by religious structures, right? The same underlying principle. Yeah. And the whole structure is built as a proxy of this one truth. So if you ask the highest person in that, why are you doing what you're doing? They'll say, refer to God as having told them to do something or some other principle, right? Even science has gone into this. So there's only one way of looking at the world, and that is through the scientific lens. And if science doesn't know how to talk about something, let's say consciousness, it's just thrown out of the discourse. You're discredited. Just as in a religious context, you can be excommunicated if you talk about something that is not part of their reality. In a political party, you'll be looked at as the opposition if you don't agree with them. Scientific establishment does the same thing, right? So this monotheistic thinking is something else that has taken hold of the earth.
Yes.
Leftists use it, rightists use it, religious people use it, organizations use it. And what do these kind of things do? They actually destroy the essence of what is human. These kinds of thinking destroy the earth.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Right. And I think that is the new discourse that is important. How do you wake people up to these kinds of use of ideas?
Misuse, right? Like misuse of
these ideas.
Yeah.
Right? For what? One, you make use of people's fear, either to make money or to get political power. Right? See what is happening with COVID. Right? Where do you find the truth? Okay, papers are full of sensational news. You have journalists making use of this context for TRPs or pushing their own political agenda. Yeah. Though any of us in the realm of citizens of this world have access to accurate data about the virus. Right? In every situation you take, this is what is happening.
Yes.
So to me, that is the real issue. This left, right, center, and all that are obfuscations of the reality of what is the kind of discourse necessary if things have to shift.
Okay. Yeah. So one part of the discourse you already named, which is to make these processes visible and their destructive impacts visible. You also laid out the problem in a way, Raghu, in the sense that truth is so hard to discern. And we put like Satyamev Jayate on top of...
Truth is not hard to discern. There are people who are willing to discern truth for you. There are scientists who are unwilling. This whole issue about the bees, for example, or plastics, for example. The laboratory things, the studies that linked the pesticide, for example, to bee death, or the presence of certain chemicals to reproductive health disorders or various other kinds of disorders is about 15, 20 years old. Truth is not that difficult to come by. Problem is, how is truth used?
Is it used in a life-enhancing manner or a life-destroying manner almost?
A death-enhancing manner.
Yeah.
Look at how much of investment goes into defense.
Yeah.
Defense is directly piling up resources for dealing death. So my contention is that a lot of the discourse that we are seeing now is actually a collusion, either consciously or unconsciously, to not ask these fundamental questions that will change the way we live. Yeah.
Irrespective of which side you are on, you're colluding with the status quo in a way.
With using science in this way, using human suffering in a certain way, and all of that.
And so you're saying that rather than a position like center, the real question is how do we disrupt some of these ways of thinking first, or that's the work.
That's the work.
That's the work for someone
how do you decolonize yourself, decondition yourself in a way that there is some possibility of discernment.
And have that conversation with others also. I'm guessing that we should, I mean, a lot of this work is dialoguing with others and collectively forming some of these bubbles where you can first disrupt it and then mainstream them.
And clear your own mind.
First clearing our own minds.
What is the basis on which I am making meaning? Can I start questioning that? Yeah. Am I taking it for granted, for example, that something put out there in the name of science is the truth? Right? And so much of stuff that is being taught in schools is politically motivated. The history that is taught is politically motivated. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does this happen? Yeah, for example, I was reading recently, a kind of almost like a lament, of the Native American. Okay. So this was a small little episode that they talk about, right? So there's this person who thinks that he's done a great job of creating a museum, okay, of a certain tribe that lives in that area, and they take the tribal elders and show them the museum.
It's 12:30.
And at the end of looking at all of that, these elders are asked, what do you think about the museum? So one of them says, looks like those people lived interesting lives. Right? You understand the sadness of this, no? So that tribe has been exploited. Its lands have been taken away. And some American professor's lens of what that tribe is all about and the meanings of existence of that tribe is put up. Right. So what happens to those people? Yeah. What's the reality of those people? What are you doing? So here you've obfuscated the violence of genocide, the reality of colonization, and valorized it by putting up some museum. Right? This kind of thing is going on in so many areas. The name of modernity, that's another huge, that's the third peg. Yeah, this idea of modernity.
Which would be the combination of the scientific and the monotheism that you named.
The monotheism, the colonizing
influence, or using modernity as a pretext.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, just look at the key issues that your generation is going to face for sure, and I'm hoping I've passed away by that time. Yeah, climate change, lack of resources, the disparity between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
Right? In all probability, national tensions. Because every time these kinds of, things like COVID or some of these huge issues have come up, sooner or later, there is war or this or that to, politically shift attention. All kinds of things have happened. Right? So all of that is looming in front of you. Now, unless you go down to the root cause, in a sense, and look at these 3 or 4 ways of thinking that have caught hold of the mind, what are you going to do?
Yeah, if you don't go there, we'll just create more of the same, just with different language or with basically.
Yeah, just take a simple thing, Abhishek. You're going to watch this cricket T20 or whatever in the evening because you want to relax. Okay? You can't, because at the end of every over, there are a series of ads. One ad is telling you you're not white enough. And this whitening cream, which has been proven by science to make you whiter, is the thing to have. Okay, now look at how bad science and colonizing are playing out in this one little thing.
Together, yeah.
Together, right? This whitening cream is probably going to create all kinds of diseases for you because skin, when it is covered up with anything, stops breathing. Right? So I don't know if any research or any study has been done. Even if it's done, it'll be obfuscated. Second, they're telling you if you're whiter, you're somehow better than non-white.
Yes.
Right? This feeds into colonizing. This feeds into monotheistic thinking. Right? Or there'll be an ad about education. Yeah. And what it says about education, if you look at it carefully, it is saying, not that I'm going to educate you so that you discover how to find the truth or any such thing. It is saying, how are you going to get trained to fit into the job market?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Half the American universities are funded by industry lobbies.
Yes.
They're trying to bring that into India. Yeah, private education, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
So where do you go to get educated?
Yeah, I would also add one more, Raghu, which is coming to me, is even the act of watching a cricket match. Firstly, cricket not being a domestic or native kind of our own thing, but also the act of being a spectator.
Now it's ours, man.
But the act of being a spectator, I'm wondering, versus participating in life, I feel like Netflix or this increasing entertainment and just taking a spectator position and becoming comfortable, I feel somehow is affecting participation in
Of course
life.
it is. Of course it is. So what does any monotheistic thought actually demand of you? It just
Compliance.
demands compliance and obedience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how to make you obedient and compliant? Yeah, it's there in one very interesting film, either Ben-Hur or Gladiator or whatever. Yeah, there's a whole problem about people getting restive. And there's a discussion between two people, two senators. And then one of them says, give them the circus.
Gladiator, yeah. I think it was
Gladiator? Yeah.
Gladiator, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
give them the circus.
Yeah.
These cricket matches are the circus.
Hmm.
We're still using these kinds of things now, which have proved so effective. This left-right is also very, very old, cheap thinking, which is for me to come and tell you, you're the oppressed, this guy is the oppressor, without telling you very subtly that I'm the savior, come to me.
Yes.
So I create the binary out there. The reality is not just oppressor, oppressed. The reality is oppressor, oppressed, and savior. I am your savior. Come to me. Right? That's getting played out in politics. That's why leftist and rightist.
So that gets me in touch with the fact that maybe the attempt to be centrist might actually be a disguised savior attempt, which I may myself not be in touch with, to say, okay, come here, if not there, here. And what you're saying is, no, that is still thinking on the same plane and in the same paradigm. Doesn't disrupt something deeper.
It does not disrupt the current paradigm. And the current paradigm, which has actually been around for a long time. Okay, a few thousand years or more. There are very few places where the Upanishadic type of questioning has been valued and kept as a very, very critical, important thing.
So what would be this type of questioning, Raghu? Would it be dialogue? Would it be what, like?
Fundamentally, see, if you take any Upanishad, what does it do? The structure is very, very similar of all the Upanishads. The structure is very similar. Some young person will come and ask a question to a teacher. The teacher does not say, this is the answer, take it from me. The teacher says, go and inquire and find out. So the person inquires and comes up with a certain insight. So if there is another question that comes out of it, the teacher again says, go and inquire. And then there is some discussion about what has been discovered. Which is why there are comments about the Upanishads from these people who want everything in order, everything perfectly. This thing, there are a lot of contradictions inside the Upanishads. Sure, the content will be different. So if I ask you to meditate on a question that's very important for you, you'll think about it and you'll come up with an answer that you're capable of coming up with. Right? Now, if I dialogue it with you and try to understand your answer, help you understand it better and so on, it's one kind of an exchange. If I come back, after when you come back, I tell you, no, you got it wrong. This is the right answer. Right? Then it'll be consistent, no? Then all...
Get it. So you're saying the contradiction...
Every time you say something else, I'll debate you and tell you you're wrong. This is what it is.
Yeah, I hear you. Yes,
now,
yes.
Why is the Upanishad consistent? Because it values inquiry. It values the pursuit of truth, not the content. the content is going to keep on changing. But
Right.
it values questioning, it values
The process.
doubt, it values the process of deeply thinking about things. Now, one of the critical things that you need to be able to do this are practices that enable you to have a clear mind to think.
Okay.
That's all the teacher teaches you. Yeah, if you look at the Yoga Sutras, if you look at even Buddhist stuff, okay, apart from the Siddhantam that they tell you, which is actually not that important, all of these Indic methods will focus on helping you work with yourself so that your mind becomes clear and you can come up with answers that are meaningful to you. Right? Now, when you do this kind of thing, a few things are guaranteed. Right? If you start becoming truly introspective, yeah, you will understand responsibility. You'll understand compassion as a byproduct of your intense focus on discovering what is the truth of being human, what's the truth of the world, and so on. That inquiry will lead you towards greater and greater responsibility for yourself and for other people in the world.
Yes, yes.
That process is what is important for me.
I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Raghu, just one side question is: inquire into what? Into the world, into oneself, like where,
Yeah.
or what is the field of
Science.
inquiry?
So science is inquiring into the world and saying what is the truth of the world. Yeah. So if I keep inquiring into it, right, depending on my capability and the nature of my question, I'll come up with an answer today. I don't convert this answer into a dogma or a commercially important thing or anything right away, nor do I convert it into a weapon of war, nothing. I value it and see how it will help and enhance life. Let's say I need to live, whatever. The same way I can go inward and start asking, inquiring into the nature of thinking, the nature of emotions, into the nature of my psychological process. Then I come into touch with greater and greater levels of truth about myself and about all human beings. These two are extremely important for life.
Inquiry outside and inquiry within.
Inside. These two are absolutely important. What is critical in this inquiry? The clarity with which I can inquire, the clarity of the mind which can inquire. Right? So I need to do some practices. So if I have to do good science, I have to learn mathematics. I have to learn how to make logical conclusions. Right? So certain ways of thinking I have to develop, which are very, very important. Same way, if I have to inquire into myself, I have to create certain preconditions so that my mind is clear enough and capable of inquiry. All this is extremely valuable. Now, if the product of my thinking gets captured by a mind that does not respect either of these two, which is a mind that is caught with bad science, a mind that is caught with political expediency, a mind that's caught with colonization, racism, right? A mind that's caught with creating monotheistic power. What will it do? It will simply take the products of this kind of inquiry and convert it into utilitarian stuff.
Commoditize them, yeah.
Commoditize it, use it as power, use it as the basis for making money. Right?
Yeah. I think one possibility this opens up, Raghu, is that many of us could take one question and keep traveling with that question and say, keep sounding it out to somebody who we regard. Like it just gets me in touch with this whole process, which we have been like, I think we've been talking about this over time, and each time I've been doing something, bouncing it off. And I think this process is valuable for me because it's becoming so much about my own discovery of biases, my own biases and my own tendencies. So I think this is opening up this whole possibility that many of us could take one question and go deep with it and keep sounding out, go back, inquire.
That's exactly what the Yoga Sutra encourages. It says Eka Tattva Abhyasam. Eka Tattva means take any part of reality. Go into it to the full depth. Really try to understand it. So it doesn't matter where you start. You start with language, let's say. You see what Chomsky has done with it. He starts with language, which are utterances, goes into the depth of where the language comes from, what's the mind, whatever, and right, it will lead you into great depth of understanding the human reality. Take anything you want. How does a tree grow?
Right, and then you keep going into it till...
You keep going into the depth, you'll come to a more beautiful, more intuitive understanding of yourself and the world.
Yes, wow, nice.
When you don't go into this inquiry, inevitably you have to be a consumer, you have to be exploitative, you're only responding to pleasure, pain, personal motivations, and so on.
Yeah. And then the record of this, Raghu, you're saying is an Upanishad in itself. Like you record your inquiry and its evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all. Yeah. Because the content is actually not that important. The content is completely contextual.
Yeah.
But giving the importance to this inquiry and valuing this inquiry is, to me, the only antidote to what is happening now. It has always been. Yeah, if you look at Buddhist thought and if you look at yogic thought, they also set up this whole thing. Yeah, Purva Paksham, Uttara Paksham, Pratipaksham, and so on. They talk about different thoughts that are there. Like, for example, if you go back into Indian thought, there are two extremes. One is called the Charvaka, the Lokayata thinking. What does it say? It says, life is short, death is certain, maximize pleasure. What do you need to maximize pleasure? You need power. Go gain power, defeat fear, and enjoy life. In short, this is what it says. It's got a rishi. Shukracharya was teaching this. You have on the other side, you have the theories of the other world and doing various kinds of karma and things like that for the other world. Right? Now, yoga, Upanishads, the Buddhist thought oppose both. This will lead to monotheistic thinking. Though in Indian Vedic thing, it has not led to monotheistic thinking, but this is the basis. A priest will come and say, you don't know anything. I know God is talking to me. If you don't listen to me, God will send you to hell. Yes. How do you know? This is the book. God told me, I've written this book. This is God's truth. Right? You dare not oppose it. Why? If you oppose it, you'll go to hell. If you follow it, you'll go to heaven. When will you do that? After you die. Right? So in various ways, these two things have a great continuity even till today.
Yes.
So this has led to monotheistic thought. And the other one, actually, Charvaka thought led to a lot of good science in India.
Oh, really? Like?
Yeah. A lot of Ayurveda, a lot of things. right? And then you have a whole set of thinking in between. Like Indian science is found in Vaiseshika. Vaiseshika is also middle ground. Excellent science.
So you're saying there is a whole range of thought streams that have been present, and inquiry is the constant process that has
Inquiry is one
re-energized the
process
society.
that will constantly re-energize, give you hope for the future and so on. Unfortunately, this has always been a minority of people. Power, political power, economic power is with people who neither understand science properly, nor understand mysticism properly, nor understand inquiry, and are fundamentally creating power structures. Yeah, look at the amount of money that's being used for defense and offense and whatever. Right? If that same amount of money is used for really fundamental education, right? Good medicine, and so on, there'll be no sickness in the earth. There'll be no laboratory that is creating biological weapons that escape and create problems. Yeah, the amount of resources of the earth that is going into creating weapons of war, 20%, directly and indirectly, if you look at it, 20 to 25% of GDP of any country will be going for this. For years. Just imagine. Right? And this thinking, for example, justifies destroying a forest because there is some ore, iron or something has been found underneath it. We have to mine it. Why do we have to mine it? Ultimately, it will be either for political power or for economic power. Neither of which are being used to enhance human life.
Yes.
Yeah. Why is the Amazon being burnt? Some commercial reasons.
Yes. So this has really gripped us, Raghu. This whole, these 3-4 paradigms have really gripped us fairly deeply. And early on this conversation, I was feeling fairly sad and hopeless. And then when we went to Upanishads and inquiry, I felt a surge of hope that there is something that can be done. I want to go into that direction. So one is you shared about inquiry as a process and taking up something, what you said as a tattva, and going all the way deep. I think that seems to be one pathway for sure. But what else would you lay out as things for our generation then to respond to this? Like, is inquiry in and of itself sufficient? Is there action? Is there dialogue, debate?
To me, inquiry is an extremely important foundation.
Okay.
Right? And this inquiry has to be constant. It's not that I've inquired, I found the truth, now I'm going to fly a flag. Right? It can't be that. There has to be this constant introspection and asking yourself, what am I really doing? Do I really know the truth? And constant effort to understand this. That is one. I think the second critical thing is for people to really commit themselves to what I would call a dharmic living. Right? Dharmic living means what? My engagement with wealth and my engagement with things of pleasure are done in a way that is constantly enhancing of me, you, and the world. Right? I don't care what you do. You can be a musician, you can be a doctor, you can be an engineer, you can be anything you want. But can you commit yourself to making sure that whatever resources you use, your own resources, other people's resources from nature, are constantly enhancing life? And I think you have to call it out when people are using knowledge, using other people's resources in a way that is not enhancing life.
Which is at a lot of places. Yeah.
Yeah, this has got nothing to do with leftist, rightist, nothing. Look at what China is doing. Is what China leftist or rightist?
It's a strange capitalist, leftist kind of
No,
amalgamation.
I mean, the way they're dealing with Xinjiang, the way they
Yeah.
deal with any small possible statement against the state. Recently, I read about some businessman who lost a few $1 billion in value, right, in their stock market because he said something about a Ming dynasty long back, which could have been interpreted as a criticism of the present government. Okay?
Hypersensitive. Yeah, this is.
He loses value in the stock market. What does that mean? It means millions of people in China are afraid that this one seemingly oppositional statement could bring down the wrath of the government on him. His company will lose value. So before all that happens, quickly cash in and pull out my money. So
That
can you
deep. The
understand
fear is that deep.
how deep this whole mind thing is?
Yeah.
And this is the mind that is destroying the earth.
Yeah. It's found its way into India also. I feel like
It's found its way everywhere, man.
Yeah, I somehow imagined we would be more resilient with our cultural soil and with our richness.
We tried,
to resist.
We tried with Gandhiji, Baji. There are so many people who tried to revive this. We actually won our independence because we still believed in it. But I don't know if people who got that independence valued the process. So people will have to make a choice, Abhishek, of saying, where do I want to put in my effort? Where do I want to put in the life force that I have? Right? Am I going to put it in a way that's a bargain? Am I going to use myself, my mind, and all my energies to trade it in a job market? Or will I trade it in some other place for either for power or for money? Or am I going to invest it in real enlivening of the world and of myself? See, till a few generations back, you could always go away from this world if you didn't like it. Now there's nowhere to go. Yeah, apparently people went to America long back for religious freedom or something like that. Right, and the worst massacres of the American Indians happened at the hands of so-called pilgrim fathers or whoever on the East Coast. So at one level, there's nowhere to go except to go inward, discover your truth, stay on the journey of discovering your truth, and stand up for it.
It's 13 hours.
And I'm not advocating one more revolution. I'm not advocating one more flying of a flag. I found this truth. Let me fly this flag. Yeah, just increase this possibility of honest dialogue, increase the possibility of honest self-introspection, of science. I think good science is really, really important. Yeah, dialogue that allows many truths to
Flower to come forth.
appear is very, very important.
And
And
allowing those
find
multiple truths to just be rather
multiple.
than try to cobble them into
How
one.
do I know what's the ultimate truth, man?
Yeah.
If I'm a really scientific mind, right, I'm going to look at every statement of truth as saying, yeah, this is possible. Let me explore. I'm not going to give up exploration at any point of time. So a truly scientific mind can never become dogmatic. It can never become exploitative. The same way a truly introspective mind can never become power crazy. It can never run after power.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think, if you want to look at what might be an alternative, it is really valuing these three things: valuing good science, valuing deep contemplation, and valuing dialogue.
Okay. Hmm. So, few final inquiry questions, Raghu,
Yeah.
because I know it's been an hour. Uh, so, this conversation, Raghu, is also in context of something called the fellowship that I initiated and reached out to other peers around me with just two questions saying, are you committed to inner and outer change for life in spirit? And are you willing to walk together? So, just trying to huddle a collective of more or less people in their 20s and 30s who seem to have a resonance, who seem to have already done some work, and to shift this conversation from 1 and 2 years to like 30, 40 years. Like, what would we be able to do if we commit that kind of time of our life to doing something, to building something, which can shift things, and slowly starting to take it to places, because we also need to, if we really want to shift something, only a handful of people doesn't really cut it. Like, you need a collective to happen. And just as somebody who could possibly give some pointers to such a collective as it forms, what would you point us to do? Imagining that there is a group that would say, and it is actually starting to form, right? Committing 30, 40 years to serving the country, to serving the world, to reviving things in different ways through their own paths, but also together.
I think this commitment itself is superb. My only caution would be not to become too self conscious about what you discover.
Not become too self-conscious, like
About
to
what
be
you discover. And say, oh, yeah, we as a group have discovered the truth and let's go and spread the truth.
okay, to stay in that humility and that open-mindedness of the
And
process.
committed to the process of saying, let's see what it means to create a meaningful world for ourselves and for others.
So just stay committed to that
That
ongoing
commitment is
process.
great. That commitment is great.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the danger is in saying, oh, yeah, we've discovered something, so let's go and spread the word.
Okay. But then how do we grow if we don't spread the word or invite others into that? Like, what is the way to,
Live,
or
live,
drop the
live a
intent to
meaning.
grow?
I don't know, Abhishek. I don't know. Yeah. See, at this point of time where I am now, beyond saying, let me live, and if somebody wants to come and talk to me, they talk to me. I share with them what I know. If it's meaningful, it's meaningful. If it's not, it's not. That's where I am.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm reminded of this old story of a rabbi.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's a nice little story. He says, when I was in my 20s, I thought I was going to discover the truth and change the world.
Hmm.
Then I grew up a little bit. And then I said, let me discover the truth and change a few people around me who are,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah. And then he said, then I came down to saying, let me see if I can change at least a handful. Now I'm praying that I can at least have some change in myself before I pass away.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
I honestly have come to that point where I don't think there is, I don't, I don't, for myself, I don't think I can change anybody.
Oh, that's coming from you. That means that's quite something.
Yeah, if you
Seeing
have the
people.
question, Abhishek, if you have a question, you'll come and have a dialogue. If I don't make sense, you'll go to somebody else who makes sense. If you're really committed to that question, right? You will go and do things to seek the answer. Can I instill a question in you? Can I instill a really, critical inquiry in you? I cannot. If you have that inquiry, right? If your inquiry is about science, you'll go to a man of science. And until your thirst is quenched, you will not give up. The same way, if you have questions about life, they're really fundamental, important questions, you will quest after its answer.
There is
That
also
is really important.
something, but there's also something, Raghu, about having people being able to tap into that capacity, right? Either it's presence of people like you, or I don't know what lets people tap into that and bring them alive with like a fire of inquiry. Like what would, I don't know if it's a formula or, but there is some set of conditions that brings.
To me, the condition is, Abhishek, if you have the spark, yeah, of, let's say, self-inquiry. If you have the spark of saying, how do I live a healthy life? I can share with you what I have done on these two. Right now, if that fans the spark a little bit, great. If you don't have that spark,
okay, then there's nothing that.
Nothing.
Okay.
Right?
Wow.
You'll go from one crisis to another. If you wake up in the first crisis, then you'll start seeking. If you don't, you'll go and create the second crisis. Just look at the history of mankind, yeah?
Crisis to crisis, yeah.
Yeah, we've had colonization of such extreme violence, na?
Yeah.
King Leopold, the whole of the Americas. What have we learned, man? More atom bombs. That's what we've learned.
Yeah.
What has Israel learned after they've been through a Holocaust? Look at the way they're dealing with the Palestinians. Where is the learning, damn it? I mean, the reality of the fact that we're going to get a climate disaster and renewable resources disaster is not new knowledge. Right? Extremely good papers have been written about it. Excellent research have been done about it for almost 50, 60 years.
Yeah. That's true. So the spark you're almost saying is a prerequisite, and then if that spark is there, then you have clearly said that how to live a healthy life and the journey of inner contemplation are two areas where somebody with a spark can come with you and dialogue.
Yeah.
And
I'd be happy to have a dialogue without claiming any, maybe I'll talk sense, maybe I'll talk nonsense, but I'm willing to talk with you.
Lovely. Wow, that's
but if
amazing.
you come to me with a question, how do I make more money? I don't know, Baba. I'm not interested. I don't want to have that dialogue with you.
True.
If you want to know how to run a better ad campaign so people will buy what you don't need, I'm not interested. Yeah. If you want to talk about how to create a political party and win an election, I'm not interested.
Sure. Wow, I hear you, Raghu. So thanks for putting that out. Yeah. I still feel though there is something I'll come back to you with, because there is definitely some invisible field which allows for transformation to happen. I don't know whether it's in your presence or is it the spaces you create, but there's definitely something there. I don't know what it is, but there is. That I know that there is. In
Good
my
for
own
you.
experience, yes, there's definitely a field, and there is something that happens in that field. which is lovely. And it's not only one data point. So
I'm happy if that field fans your fire.
yes, it totally does. It totally does. And it's a regenerative fire. It's not something that gets quenched. It comes back with newer questions. So I'm very fortunate to have you to dialogue with and to take back new things and so on. So great. So anything else in closing, Raghu? Thank you so much for this conversation.
I'm willing to be the fan whenever you want.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for this.
Thank you.